Everyone told him the Minnesota cold would kill him, and they were right. It kills dozens of people every single year, including people with roofs over their heads and heat running through their walls. But this man did not have a roof. He had a pile of wooden pallets that a warehouse on the edge of Minneapolis had stacked behind their dumpsters, scheduled for landfill pickup on Friday morning. He had a tarp, a box of 3-inch screws, and 6 days before the first hard freeze. What he built from those castoffs did not just keep him alive through one brutal winter, it kept him alive through 6 of them, including the polar vortex of 2019, when wind chills in Minnesota hit negative 55 degrees Fahrenheit and exposed skin froze solid in under 10 minutes. The system told him he had no options left. He looked at the trash pile and saw a house. Meet Ray. That's what the people at the encampment called him. Nobody knew his last name, and he never offered it. What they did know was this: Ray had been sleeping rough in Minneapolis for 2 winters before he built the shelter. He had worked construction for most of his adult life, and when he looked at a pile of 48 by 40-inch wooden shipping pallets stacked 6 feet high behind a warehouse loading dock, he did not see garbage. He saw lumber, he saw structure. He saw insulation cavities and load-bearing stringers and a floor that could be elevated off frozen ground. You have to understand something about Ray to understand what he did next. This was a man who had spent decades watching other people build things, framing walls, pouring slabs, reading grade, and who had absorbed, without ever writing it down, the fundamental logic of how a structure keeps heat inside and cold outside. That knowledge does not disappear when your life falls apart. It waits. And when you need it badly enough, it comes back with a clarity that can feel like fury. Ray was not a romantic figure wandering some frozen wilderness. He was a 53-year-old man who had lost his apartment in 2016 after a back injury ended his construction work, who had burned through his savings in 8 months, and who had spent 2 winters cycling through the shelter lottery system, the joint Monday night drawing that Simpson Shelter, Our Saviors, and St. Stephen's run together for a sharply limited number of 28-day beds. You got picked, you had a bed. You didn't get picked, you slept outside in Minneapolis in January. The system was not broken by accident. It was underfunded by design, perpetually short by hundreds of beds, and Ray had stopped trusting it to save his life. So in the fall of his 3rd year on the street, he decided to save it himself. He started hauling pallets. Before we go any further, have you ever actually stopped and looked at a wooden shipping pallet and thought about what it really is, because most people haven't? Drop a comment below right now and tell me, did you know that a standard GMA pallet is engineered to hold 6,000 pounds of static load? 3 short tons. These are not scraps. These are not waste. The next time you walk past a stack of them behind a grocery store or a hardware warehouse, I want you to look at them the way Ray did. Because what Ray saw and what you have been trained to see are 2 entirely different things. And what you're about to discover will change the way you look at every discarded material you have ever walked past without stopping. Here is what the system offered Ray as an alternative. The emergency shelter network in Minneapolis during the winters Ray spent outside was running at capacity and beyond. People Serving People, the city's largest family shelter, was consistently over capacity. Catholic Charities described the emergency network as hundreds of beds short of the minimum needed, not dozens, hundreds. Single adult men faced the lottery, and on any given night, hundreds of people lost that lottery and walked back out into temperatures that regularly dropped to 4 degrees Fahrenheit in January. Wind chills during polar vortex events have reached negative 55 degrees Fahrenheit in the Twin Cities. Skin freezes in 10 minutes at those temperatures. Hypothermia begins to set in within hours without meaningful shelter. And here is the part that should genuinely make you angry. The infrastructure had a known gap. That gap was documented in reports year after year. Advocates raised the alarm. Minnesota recorded over 500 cold-related deaths in a single 17-year period, and the trend was getting worse, not better. The people falling through that gap did not fail the system. The system failed them, made a deliberate underfunding choice, recorded the consequences under a clinical category, and moved on. That is not a breakdown. That is a decision. And somewhere out in the dark, it was Ray's problem to solve. And this is where it gets remarkable. The first thing Ray understood about building a shelter from pallets was something the modern emergency shelter industry, with all of its grant funding and professional staff and annual reports, had genuinely forgotten or never bothered to learn. The enemy is not cold. The enemy is contact. Cold air moving against warm skin pulls heat from a human body at a rate that is not gradual and forgiving. It is aggressive and cumulative. But cold air cannot penetrate solid wood at anything like that speed. Wood resists. Wood slows the transfer. Softwood pine, the species used in most shipping pallets, carries a thermal resistance value of roughly 1.4 per inch of thickness. That sounds modest. It is not modest when you account for what a pallet actually is. A pallet's deck boards sit on top of stringer blocks that create sealed cavities inside the pallet body. Chambers, pockets of air that go nowhere and do nothing except sit perfectly still. And still air is one of the most effective insulators that exists anywhere in nature. Think of it this way. A down jacket does not keep you warm because the feathers are warm. It keeps you warm because the feathers trap air and hold it motionless against your body. The pallet is doing the exact same thing. It traps air in chambers between the deck boards and the bottom boards, and that trapped air fights the cold silently, all night long, without batteries, without electricity, without a monthly payment going to anyone. Ray's first move was the floor. This is where most improvised shelters fail, and it is the single detail that separates someone who actually understands construction from someone who is simply desperate and cold. The ground in Minneapolis in January is not just cold, it is a heat sink of almost supernatural aggression. Frozen earth pulls warmth out of anything, resting directly on it with relentless, tireless efficiency. It will drain a sleeping bag. It will drain a foam mat. Given enough time, it will drain a human body. Ray laid 2 pallets flat on 4 cinder blocks he had salvaged from a demolition site, creating a floor that sat a full 6 inches above the actual ground surface. Underneath that gap, he packed a layer of gravel for drainage. Over the top of the pallet's surface, he stretched a sheet of heavy plastic sheeting, the moisture barrier. Invisible from the outside, it cost him nothing. And it was the difference between waking up damp and hypothermic and waking up dry and functional. Then the walls went up. Ray stood pallets vertically and screwed them together at the corners, building a box approximately 8 feet by 8 feet, using the larger warehouse pallets he had specifically selected, the ones that stood close to 6 feet tall, when upright. He trimmed the overhanging deck boards on the side pallets with a $4 thrift store handsaw, exposing the raw stringer blocks beneath, then drove 3-inch screws through the front pallet boards directly into those exposed frames. Tight, solid, no flex. If you put your shoulder against Ray's walls and pushed, they did not move. Builders who came through the encampment to look at it in later years said the same thing, almost word for word. It was framed like a real structure, because that is exactly what it was. Here is where it gets interesting. The pallets alone were not enough. Ray knew that before he drove the first screw. The cavities were there, the trapped air was working, but a Minnesota winter at -20 does not negotiate with modest insulation. It comes through eventually. So Ray packed every cavity in every wall pallet with straw. He sourced it from a feed store that kept damaged bales behind their loading dock and gave them away rather than haul them out. Straw bale insulation has been used in construction for well over a century. Earthen and sod houses on the northern plains were packed with it. The tightly compressed dead stalks create the same trapped air effect as the pallet cavities, but multiplied, denser, more layered, fighting the cold at every microscopic scale, simultaneously. Ray's packed walls became a thermal barrier that the cold had to work through inch by inch, and every inch resisted. Every inch bought time, every inch bought mourning. He did not know the technical term for what he was building. He knew it worked the same way his hands know how to hold a hammer before his brain consciously tells them to. The roof was corrugated metal panels, 3 of them overlapping and running at a shallow pitch that shed snow instead of collecting it. This matters more than it might sound. Minnesota averages over 45 inches of snowfall every year. A flat pallet roof, unprepared, will collapse. A cubic foot of wet, dense snow weighs 20 pounds or more, and it accumulates fast and without warning. Ray had watched roofs fail on job sites during 3 decades of construction work. He knew the enemy of a roof is not wind, it is horizontal load. The pitch solved that. Snow slid, and the structure stood. He wrapped the exterior walls in 2 overlapping layers of heavy polyethylene tarp, running the upper layer over the lower in a shingled arrangement, so water moved down and away from the seams instead of into them. The door was a pallet hung on 2 heavy hinges, with a strip of rubber weather stripping salvaged from an old freezer door packed around the frame. It sealed, not perfectly, but well enough. In a Minnesota winter, well enough is everything. Now, why did a man building from discarded materials understand these principles better than a system spending millions of dollars every single year? Here is the part most people never think to ask. Pallet shelters, straw insulation, elevated floors over moisture barriers. These are not new ideas. They are old ideas. Extraordinarily old. Sod houses on the Minnesota prairie in the 1880s used earth packed around timber frames precisely because the dead air in compressed organic material resists heat transfer. Scandinavian settlers building in territories with winters identical to Minnesota's used banked earth and layered organic insulation around their structures as a matter of basic survival literacy. Indigenous communities across the northern plains built semi-subterranean winter lodges with insulated roofs and elevated sleeping platforms for exactly the same thermal reasons Ray was rediscovering from first principles in a Minneapolis encampment. The knowledge was never complicated. It was never secret. It required no patent and no subscription and no professional certification. It required only understanding why warmth moves and how to slow it down. So why did we stop teaching it? 3 reasons, and they all arrived at roughly the same moment in the 20th century. Speed first. Industrial construction needed methods that scaled. A crew framing a subdivision cannot take 3 days to pack straw into wall cavities for each unit. Speed required standardization, and standardization required materials that behaved identically every time. Engineered lumber, fiberglass bats, spray foam, rather than organic materials that varied by season and source. Cost second. Straw and earth and salvaged wood are nearly free, which means they generate no revenue for a supply chain. The shift to manufactured insulation products was not driven by their superiority. It was driven by the fact that they could be priced, packaged, and sold through distribution networks in ways that straw bales from a feed store simply cannot. And third, centralized energy made the old methods seem unnecessary. When natural gas heat became cheap and abundant, the precision of your insulation mattered less. You just turned the furnace up. The hidden cost of that dependency is visible everywhere now, in energy bills, in climate load, and in the fact that when the supply chain breaks or the bill cannot be paid, people are left with no thermal knowledge whatsoever and no materials they know how to use. Ray was the exception. Ray had never stopped knowing. The shelter's interior volume was small, roughly 600 cubic feet. That is not a flaw. That is physics doing exactly what it should. A smaller enclosed space heats faster and holds heat longer from the same energy source. Ray's primary body heat was his own body, radiating roughly 100 watts continuously, the output of a modest light bulb running every hour of every night. In a well-sealed, well-insulated 600 cubic foot space, 100 watts is not nothing. On the coldest nights, with temperatures outside at 10 degrees below zero, the interior of Ray's shelter held at 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Not warm, not by any standard you would recognize as comfortable, not a place you would choose to be, but 22 degrees is not zero. 22 degrees is the difference between waking up and not waking up. So why did the shelter survive 6 full winters, including the 2019 polar vortex, which sent wind chills to negative 55 degrees Fahrenheit across the Twin Cities and killed people in houses with functioning heating systems when most improvised structures collapse or are abandoned after one season? 3 reasons. First, Ray treated it like a building, not a campsite. He maintained it. Every fall before freeze, he retarped the exterior, repacked straw that had compressed or absorbed moisture, checked the floor barrier, tightened the corner screws. Second, he upgraded it continuously. By year 3, rigid foam boards sat over the plastic floor barrier, and salvaged carpet covered the foam. The floor held heat by year 3, the way a passive solar slab holds heat, stubbornly, slowly, against sustained external pressure. Third, and this is the one the shelter industry most needs to hear, consistency beats perfection. A structure maintained imperfectly, but continuously, will outlast a structure built perfectly and then left alone. Ray understood maintenance the way a craftsman understands it, not as a chore, as respect for the thing you built and the purpose it serves. The system eventually came back around to Ray, not to help him, to clear him out. In the winter of his 6th year, the city issued an eviction notice for the encampment. By then, Ray's shelter had become a kind of silent landmark. Other residents had built adjacent structures using the same principles: elevated floors, straw-packed walls, shingled tarps. There was a small village there, improvised and unauthorized and remarkably functional. The city's decision to dismantle it was made by people who had never walked through it, who had no housing plan ready for its residents, and who cited ordinance violations as their justification. Ray took his tools and his knowledge and moved. He found another location. He found more pallets. He started again, because the pallets were still there, stacked behind every warehouse in the city, stamped HT, waiting for someone to look at them the way he looked at them. If this story is sitting with you, if you're feeling something shift in how you see what gets thrown away around you, hit like on this video. It costs you nothing, and it helps more people find this channel. Here is what you can actually do with this. Option 1, the easiest. Find a pallet. Hardware stores, feed stores, warehouse loading docks. They are there, and they are almost always free. Look for the letters HT burned into the stringer block. That stamp means heat-treated, structurally sound, safe to use. If you see MB stamped anywhere on the pallet, walk away. MB means methyl bromide, a toxic fumigant, and those pallets should never be used for shelter or burned. Option 2, look into straw bale construction. There are documented builds across cold climates on every continent using this material. The thermal performance is real and well understood. Option 3, the minimum. Start looking at your own discarded materials differently. The insulating principle Ray built his survival on. Trapped Still AR is behind every piece of insulation in your walls, your winter jacket, your sleeping bag. The mechanism is not proprietary. It belongs to physics. And physics is available to anyone who takes the time to understand it. Ray was not a tragic figure. He was not a primitive. He was not someone to pity from a comfortable distance. He was an engineer working with available materials, applying knowledge accumulated over a lifetime in conditions that would have paralyzed most people who consider themselves resourceful. He saw what the pallets were. He understood the thermal logic before anyone around him gave him credit for understanding anything at all. He built something that worked. 6 winters, polar vortex and all, through maintenance and knowledge and a refusal to accept that what the world throws away has no value left in it. The knowledge to survive was never lost. It was stacked behind the dumpster, stamped for landfill, and scheduled for pickup on Friday morning. We dig through what the modern world discards, materials, methods, ideas, and we bring back what still works. Tell us in the comments, what forgotten skill or thrown away material do you want us to investigate next?